The room went silent. Dead silent. The kind of silence that makes your skin prickle, that makes you hold your breath without even realizing it. Journalists stopped typing mid-sentence. Cameras zoomed in tighter. Every single person in that Melbourne press conference room understood they were witnessing something extraordinary, something that would reverberate across the tennis world for months, maybe years to come. Arna Sabalenka, the reigning world number one, the woman who hits tennis balls with such ferocious power that opponents have nightmares about facing her serve, was about to change everything with just 4 words. Not a carefully crafted statement prepared by publicists and lawyers, not a diplomatic non-answer designed to offend nobody while saying nothing. 4 simple words that would shatter the establishment's wall of silence and give permission to everyone who had been whispering in corners to finally speak their truth out loud. She's not wrong. That's it. That's all she said. 4 words, 21 letters, 1 period. But the impact was seismic, like dropping a nuclear bomb into the calm waters of professional tennis politics. Because those 4 words weren't just agreement with Alex Eala's complaints about officiating and double standards. They were a declaration of war against a system that has protected itself for decades by silencing anyone who dared to question it. They were a coronation, the queen of tennis publicly backing the princess of the Philippines, validating her frustrations and telling the entire establishment that the days of young players shutting up and accepting their place are over. The fallout was immediate and absolutely explosive. Social media platforms erupted in real time as the video clips spread like wildfire across Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and every tennis forum on the internet. Within hours, hashtags were trending in multiple languages and across multiple continents. The tennis world, which had been walking on eggshells for weeks trying to pretend everything was fine, suddenly had permission to acknowledge what everyone had been seeing with their own eyes. The double standards, the questionable calls, the way certain players seem to get every benefit of the doubt while others have to fight through not just their opponents, but the officials as well. But here's where this story gets even more complicated, even more dramatic, even more impossible to look away from. Because while Sabalenka's defense of Eala was creating shockwaves through the professional tennis establishment, another story was simultaneously unfolding, one that threatens to tear the sport's growing Asian fan base completely apart. We're talking about the rivalry between Alex Eala and China's Zheng Qinwen, a rivalry that has transcended sport and become something cultural, something nationalistic, something that has fans on both sides behaving in ways that range from passionate to disturbing, to genuinely concerning for the safety of the players involved. This isn't your typical sports rivalry where fans good-naturedly trash talk and then shake hands after the match. This is different. This is intense. This is personal. And it's getting worse by the day. The Eala-Jang rivalry has become a proxy war between the Philippines and China, with all the historical, political, and cultural baggage that entails. Every match between them becomes an event that transcends tennis. Every social media post is analyzed for hidden meanings. Every gesture on court is interpreted through a lens of national pride and historical grievance. And the fans, God help us, the fans have turned this into something that occasionally feels more dangerous than entertaining. Filipino fans have mobilized with an intensity that is simultaneously beautiful and terrifying. They flood Eala's social media with messages of support and love, creating fan art, organizing watch parties, and treating her matches like national holidays. But that passion has a dark side. Jung's social media accounts are regularly bombarded with hateful comments, nationalist insults, and threats that go far beyond acceptable trash talk. Chinese fans have responded in kind, defending their rising star with equal ferocity and targeting Eala with their own barrage of negativity. The situation has escalated to the point where both players have had to address it publicly, asking their fans to dial back the hostility and remember that, at the end of the day, this is still supposed to be sport. But telling passionate fans to calm down is like trying to put toothpaste back in the tube. Once those emotions are unleashed, once national pride becomes intertwined with athletic competition, rationality goes out the window. And now, with Sabalenka publicly backing Eala, with the world number one essentially validating everything Filipino fans have been saying about their player being treated unfairly, That fire has been doused with gasoline. The next time Eala and Jung meet on court, it's not going to be just another tennis match. It's going to be a cultural flashpoint, a moment that will require security protocols typically reserved for political summits or heavyweight boxing matches. Tournament directors are already nervous. How do you manage a crowd when half of them are there to celebrate their national hero, and the other half are equally determined to see her lose? How do you ensure player safety when the emotions in the stadium are running so hot that a single controversial call could trigger chaos? How do you maintain the integrity of the sport when every decision an umpire makes is going to be interpreted as evidence of bias one way or the other? These aren't theoretical questions anymore. These are real concerns that tennis officials are going to have to address, and soon, because this rivalry isn't going away. If anything, it's intensifying. And while all this drama unfolds, while Sabalenka picks sides and fans divide into warring camps, there's a third player in this narrative whose story might be the most tragic of all. Mirra Andreeva, the Russian prodigy who burst onto the scene with such dazzling brilliance that comparisons to Sharapova and even the Williams sisters seemed not just appropriate, but inevitable. Andreeva is only 18 years old, the same age many of us were figuring out our college majors and trying to remember to do laundry, and she's already achieved things most professional tennis players never will. A top 5 world ranking, multiple prestigious titles, millions of dollars in prize money, feature articles in major publications calling her the future of women's tennis. The pressure, the expectations, the weight of an entire nation's hopes resting on her teenage shoulders, it's almost incomprehensible. And now, according to one of the sharpest tactical minds in tennis history, it might all be falling apart. Brad Gilbert, the legendary coach who has guided multiple players to Grand Slam glory, who literally wrote the book on Winning Ugly, who can watch 30 seconds of a match and diagnose exactly what's going wrong with surgical precision, has publicly identified Andreeva's problem. He calls it a fear hand. 2 words that are as catchy as they are devastating, as brilliant in their simplicity as they are brutal in their accuracy. Gilbert's diagnosis, delivered via social media where nothing ever truly disappears, was clinical and merciless. Andreeva's forehand, once a weapon of mass destruction that opponents dreaded facing, has become passive, spinny, and error-prone under pressure. Instead of stepping into the court and crushing balls with the aggressive intent that made her famous, she's pushing them back, playing not to lose rather than to win, letting doubt creep into her stroke mechanics until what should be her greatest weapon has become her most exploitable weakness. Every opponent on tour now knows exactly where to attack. Every coach has video compilations showing how to expose the flaw, and worst of all, Andreeva knows they know, which creates a vicious cycle of anxiety that makes the problem even worse. This isn't just a technical issue that can be fixed with a few hours on the practice court, adjusting her grip or her swing path. This is psychological. This is the kind of problem that ends careers if it's not addressed immediately and aggressively. Because once fear takes root in an athlete's mind, once doubt becomes part of the internal dialogue that plays during crucial points, it's incredibly difficult to excavate. The fear hand isn't about lacking talent or athleticism. It's about the hesitation that creeps in when the entire world is watching. It's the voice that whispers, "What if I miss?" as you're preparing to hit a forehand down the line. It's playing tentative when the moment demands boldness, defending when you should be attacking, hoping your opponent makes a mistake rather than creating your own opportunities. Gilbert's warning was stark and carried the weight of decades of experience coaching at the highest levels. This has to be fixed in the short term, he emphasized, or Andreeva will struggle to make deep runs in tournaments. Not eventually or over time or when she's ready. Short term, immediately, urgently. Because professional tennis is a sport with a notoriously narrow window of opportunity, especially for women. The physical demands are crushing. The mental strain is relentless. And the competition is endless, with hungry teenagers emerging every year ready to take your spot if you show even a moment of vulnerability. We saw the fear hand in devastating action during Andreeva's Australian Open campaign, which ended in the round of 16 with a straight sets loss to Elena Vesnina. For any normal 18-year-old player, Reaching the fourth round of a Grand Slam would be cause for celebration, a sign of steady progress and future potential. But Andreeva isn't normal. She's not supposed to be developing steadily, she's supposed to be dominating. Expectations aren't just high, they're astronomical. And a fourth round exit isn't viewed as success, it's interpreted as regression, as evidence that something fundamental has gone wrong. The statistics from that loss tell a story that's painful to examine. Andreeva won only 59% of her first serve points, a number that's simply unacceptable for someone with her talent level and ranking. She couldn't dictate play. She couldn't impose her game on her opponent. She was reacting instead of creating, scrambling instead of controlling, surviving instead of thriving. And at the center of every problem was the forehand that used to be her signature shot, now transformed into a liability that opponents exploited ruthlessly. What makes Andreeva's situation particularly heartbreaking is the context surrounding it. This isn't happening in a vacuum. She's dealing with the fear hand while also navigating the complicated politics of being a Russian athlete in the current global climate. The questions about the war that she has to answer repeatedly in press conferences, questions that have nothing to do with tennis but that she can't avoid because journalists keep asking them. The isolation of representing a country that's been banned from competing under its flag at certain events. The constant scrutiny of every word she says being analyzed for political implications rather than simply being taken as the thoughts of a teenager trying to focus on her sport. Many, many times, nobody in this world, Russian athletes or Belarusian athletes, support the war. Nobody. How can we support the war? Nobody, she said in one particularly emotional press conference, her frustration and exhaustion visible to everyone watching. These are the words of someone who just wants to play tennis, who didn't ask to become a political symbol, who shouldn't have to defend her right to exist in the sport she's dedicated her life to. But that's the reality she faces every single day, and it's impossible to believe that emotional burden isn't contributing to the mental blocks that have created her fear hand. So now we have three interlocking stories, three narratives that are separately compelling but together create a picture of women's tennis at an absolute crossroads. Sabalenka, the established champion using her platform and power to defend a younger player and challenge a system that's unfair. Eala, the rising star who refuses to accept double standards and has become a cultural icon whose matches transcend sport. Zhang, the Chinese competitor who represents a different kind of tennis machine and who has become, fairly or not, the antagonist in a rivalry that's spiraling beyond anyone's control. And Andreeva, the prodigy whose potential might be crumbling under pressure that no 18-year-old should have to carry alone. These aren't separate stories. They're interconnected threads in a larger narrative about what professional tennis is becoming in 2026. This is a sport wrestling with questions about fairness and accountability, about how to manage the intersection of athletics and nationalism, about what happens when social media gives fans direct access to players and removes all the traditional barriers that used to provide some protection from the most toxic elements of fandom, about whether the support structures exist to help young athletes manage the psychological demands of modern professional sport. Sabalenka's "she's not wrong" moment represents something profound about player solidarity that we haven't seen before at this level. Typically, top players stay neutral. They don't pick sides in disputes between lower-ranked competitors and officials because there's nothing to gain and potentially a lot to lose. Relationships with tournament directors matter. Relationships with umpires matter. Creating the perception that you're difficult or political can cost you wildcards, favorable scheduling, and the benefit of the doubt in close situations. The safe play is always to stay quiet, express sympathy in vague terms, and move on without actually committing to anything. But Sabalenka didn't play it safe. She looked at Eala's complaints about officiating and double standards, complaints that had gotten the young Filipino player labeled as entitled and arrogant by some critics, and she said those four magical words. She validated Eala's experience. She used her platform to amplify a voice that the establishment wanted silenced, and in doing so, she fundamentally changed the power dynamics in women's tennis. Because when the world number one, the reigning champion, the biggest star in the sport, publicly backs an outside challenger against the system, other players notice. They realize that speaking up might not be career suicide after all. They understand that solidarity is possible, that they don't have to suffer injustices quietly, that there's strength in numbers. This is leadership, real leadership. Not the performative kind where athletes post carefully vetted messages about generic causes that their sponsors have pre-approved. This is risking something real, potentially damaging important relationships, to stand up for what's right. Sabalenka knows that tournament officials aren't going to appreciate her comments. She knows that some people will accuse her of making it about herself or playing politics. She did it anyway because she believes fairness matters more than convenience. Because she's been in the sport long enough to see how young players get chewed up and spit out by a system that protects its own interests. Because she's reached a point in her career where legacy and integrity matter more than short-term considerations. The reaction from Filipino fans was predictably ecstatic. Sabalenka's comments were shared millions of times across Philippine social media, translated into Tagalog, turned into memes and graphics, celebrated as validation from the highest authority in women's tennis. The narrative that Filipino fans had been pushing, that Eala was being treated unfairly and facing double standards, had just been confirmed by the world number one. This wasn't conspiracy theorizing or nationalist bias. This was the truth, recognized and acknowledged by someone who has no stake in Philippine tennis except a commitment to fairness. But that celebration has a complicated flip side because it further inflames the already volatile Eala-Jang rivalry. Chinese fans, who were already defensive about their player being cast as the villain in this story, now feel like the entire tennis establishment is ganging up on Jung. They see Sabalenka's comments as evidence of bias against Chinese players, as proof that Eala gets special treatment and protection while Jung has to fight alone. It doesn't matter whether that perception is accurate. Perception becomes reality in the world of sports fandom, and the perception among significant portions of the Chinese tennis community is that their player is being discriminated against. The social media battles have reached genuinely disturbing levels. Death threats, doxing attempts, organized campaigns to mass report accounts and get them suspended. This goes so far beyond normal sports rivalry that it's difficult to know how to categorize it. Tournament security directors are having serious conversations about player safety protocols. Both Eala and Jung have had to address their fan bases directly, pleading for civility and reminding everyone that they're athletes, trying to do their jobs, not symbols in some larger cultural war. But those pleas fall on deaf ears because the fans don't see themselves as out of line. They see themselves as defending their player, their country, their pride against enemies who would tear them down. The next time Eala and Jung meet on court, and they will meet again because that's how tournament draws work eventually, the atmosphere is going to be unlike anything women's tennis has experienced in modern times. We're talking about genuine security concerns. We're talking about the potential for crowd disturbances that could interrupt or even halt the match. We're talking about umpires making calls while knowing that half the stadium will interpret any decision against their player as proof of corruption and bias. This is uncharted territory, and nobody seems to have a plan for how to navigate it safely. And in the middle of all this chaos, all this drama and politics and cultural warfare, Mirra Andreeva is trying to fix her fear hand and save her career. The contrast is almost cruel. While Eala is being elevated as a symbol of resistance against unfair systems and Sabalenka is being celebrated as a champion of justice, Andreeva is fighting a lonely battle against her own psychology, trying to rebuild confidence that's been shattered by a combination of technical breakdown and impossible pressure. Brad Gilbert's diagnosis was public and viral, which means every person Andreeva encounters, from journalists to fans to other players, knows about her weakness. There's no hiding from it. There's no pretending it doesn't exist. Everyone knows that her forehand is compromised, and everyone will be watching to see whether she can fix it. That level of scrutiny would be crushing for a veteran player with years of experience managing public pressure. For an 18-year-old who should be focusing on development and gradual improvement rather than crisis management and career salvation, it's almost unbearable. The technical work required to fix a fear hand is actually the easy part. Any competent coach can adjust mechanics, change grips, modify swing paths, and drill new patterns until they become automatic. The hard part is the mental reconstruction. Convincing an athlete who has lost faith in her shot to trust it again, to silence the voice of doubt that screams warnings every time she prepares to hit a forehand, to play with the freedom and aggression that made her special in the first place. That's not a few weeks of work. That's months, maybe longer, of patient rebuilding. And the question is whether Andreeva has that kind of time before the sport moves on without her. Professional tennis is brutal in its efficiency. Every tournament brings new young players hungry to make their mark. Every loss costs ranking points that are difficult to reclaim. Every sign of weakness gets exploited by opponents who are fighting their own battles to establish careers and earn livings. Andreeva's window of opportunity, which seemed limitless just a few months ago when she was being hailed as the next great champion, is already starting to narrow. If she can't fix the fear hand quickly, if she can't rediscover the aggressive, confident tennis that made her famous, she risks becoming another cautionary tale about prodigies who couldn't handle the pressure. The parallel stories of Eala rising and Andreeva struggling create a fascinating dynamic about the different paths young players take in modern tennis. Eala is ascending through advocacy and defiance, refusing to accept her place in the hierarchy and demanding better treatment, not just for herself but for all players who get squeezed by the system. Her rise isn't just about winning matches, though she's doing plenty of that. It's about representation, about proving that a player from the Philippines can compete with anyone from anywhere, about changing perceptions of who belongs in elite tennis circles.